I'm just really kind of excited to see how it unfolds.
And the thing about Dan Bylsma and Mustache Boy, and I mean, like the Gordon Bombay approach to coaching, works really well whenever you're having success and you're winning, and all's going well there. But it starts to wear off, like you mentioned, when you lose to the Flyers, and suddenly things aren't. You don't have pride in what you're doing on the ice, and then other things start to kind of trump being. Having a fun atmosphere around the rink in the room, and things like being treated fairly, kind of really come to the surface. Not just for the guys who are fighting for their spots day in day out, but for even guys like Crosby and the leaders on this team. If the coach isn't treating everybody fairly. That sends the wrong message to everyone in that room, and I think that the perception, at least from where I sit, and I see the way like guys like Simone Dupre or other people who didn't get as much of a chance as we hate to keep going back to him, but like Craig Adams, just
Craig
because
Adams.
he was the guy was his, like, I don't know. I'm running out of words to say best friend or something like that, because he was always there, and for whatever reason, one guy makes a mistake and he doesn't see the ice for 2 months, whereas Craig Adams can do the same thing and he's a regular in the lineup. So I think Mike Johnson, Rick Tocchet, if they can bring that kind of accountability and treating every player in that room fairly and having them earn their spot, similar to the way that Michel Therrien did, then I think that goes a lot further than just smiling all the time and it being fun and games.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. And Simone Dupre was asked today, basically, if he was happy with the fact that there was a new regime in charge, and if he thought it was a good thing for himself, and he couldn't help but smile, because of course it was. And did Dan Bylsma play favorites? Absolutely. And do a lot of NHL coaches? I'm sure. I don't doubt it. But yes, he has his favorites. Craig Adams is one of them. There have been a few others. Simone Dupre obviously is the ultimate example of somebody who wasn't. I mean, listen, I don't want to say Dan had it out for the guy, because I don't think that's accurate, but it was really hard for Simone to impress Dan. It was. And I feel like with Dan Bylsma, listen, history will show he was a good coach. The numbers speak for themselves. Did he lose that room a little bit last year? Yeah, I think he did. And did he lose his superstars a little bit last year? Yeah, I think he did. And, you can argue what the reasons were. I don't know. Crosby and Malkin are not coach killers. They really aren't. So some of the other all-time greats in Penguins history certainly were. But I would not accuse either of them of being that way. I don't think they're difficult to coach. But something happened last year. Things just felt really stale. That was the best stale team I've ever been around. When you look at the record they put up, yeah, that was still a really good team. But they never had any energy. They never felt like a legitimate threat to make a deep playoff run to me. So, and when that happens, something has to change.
Any truth to the rumor that Dan Bylsma bought Simone Dupre tickets to Malaysia Airlines somehow, or anything like that?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Okay,
I don't think the
good.
animosity was that strong. But no, I mean, trust me, there were times when I would ask questions about Dupre after I thought he had a good game, and Dan would go out of his way to praise everyone else, but not Dupre.
Wow.
I mean, he just didn't. Whatever, there was something about Dupre. I think it had more to do with his personality and his attitude than maybe his actual talent. Dupre rubbed the coaching staff the wrong way. He really did. I think they thought he had a lazy streak, and I think they thought he was difficult to coach, and I think they thought he was soft. And, so they didn't play him very much, and they didn't feel comfortable with him. Now, every time I see the guy play, I mean, yeah, he had some bad games, and he had a couple of really bad playoff games a couple of years ago, but Simone Dupre to me is a really big, talented guy who can skate, and for the most part has impressed me at the NHL level. Dan Bylsma knows a heck of a lot more about hockey than I do, but I think the guy's an NHL defenseman, and I think Mike Johnson's going to give him a real chance.
I don't mean to pick too much on Simone Dupre here, because I think there are certainly other examples of young talent that Dan Bylsma, or even to not to completely lay the blame off of him, because Ray Shero is involved in these decisions as well. But specifically, Bausma, again, going back to the accountability and fairness, didn't treat with that. But when you mean Dupre is the poster boy. I mean, Bausma wouldn't even pronounce his name correctly, and it was out of spite. It was on purpose. And make no mistake about it. That was intentional. But while we're on this, yes, Simon Despres. While we're on this retrospective thought, looking back in the spring, now that we've had the whole summer to digest it, what got Ray Shero fired? Because it certainly wasn't just, okay, he lost Game 7 against New York Rangers. This is it. I mean, it's a series of events that lead up to it. And if the Penguins had won Game 7 and gone on to the conference finals and maybe even into the Stanley Cup finals, would the story had been any different? I mean, because all the same factors led up to those events. There's just a couple of bounces that could have made a difference.
Well, it's fascinating stuff, because to me, it was pretty clear that it was time for Dan Bilesma to go. And I have long been a Ray Shero supporter, and I continue to be one. People accuse Ray of, selling the farm for, instant gratification. Well, he had the two best players in the world in their mid-20s. That's when you are supposed to be aggressive. And to me, in 2012 and 2013, Ray Shero gave Dan Bilesma the most talented roster in the NHL. Mm-hmm. And Dan Bilesma didn't do much with it in the playoffs. I don't see how that's Ray Shero's fault. That concerned me a little bit at the time when he was dismissed immediately. It was shocking, and I think it showed you that there was a lot more going on behind the scenes than people realized. I think there was a rift in the relationship between Ray Shero and David Morehouse. And when, you heard Mario Lemieux and Ron Burkle talk when they interviewed with Dejan Kovacevic and Gene Collier, they seemed to have almost animosity towards Shero and the job that he did. And, certainly from Morehouse's standpoint, I sense a little bit of that also. And I don't get it, but to me, it was partially a personality conflict. And Ray Shero became the scapegoat only 12 months after he won the award for best general manager in the NHL. So I think it was more of a personality conflict than anything. I really believe that. And Dan Bilesma was always going to be fired. That whole charade was embarrassing for 3 weeks. We all knew what was going to happen there. The Penguins couldn't have handled it any worse than they did, quite honestly. But why was Ray Shero fired? I think he did things that David Morehouse and Ron Burkle didn't always like. And I those two in particular, and I think that was the bottom line.
Where do you see, and obviously there's no current vacancies or anything like that, but Ray Shero in 6 months, is he going to be employed? Or, I mean, GM vacancies don't come up in the midseason as often as coaching vacancies do, but it seems odd to go into this season with Ray Shero unemployed.
It does, and he's still getting paid by the Penguins, so I don't think, much like Dan Bilesma, he's not in a position where he's going to be actively seeking a job. We will see Ray Shero be a general manager again. Oh, yeah. I promise you. He is so highly regarded around the league. He really is. And I think he's in a position now where he can be very selective. And I don't know what job it is that would be of interest to him. Penguins fans won't want to hear that he'd probably love to be the GM of the Philadelphia Flyers, but I bet he would. His dad was a legendary coach there, won 2 Stanley Cups. First-round Hypestyle has that job now, so that job probably won't be open for a while. I think that's one that probably would really appeal to Ray. But no, he'll get the right job at the right time. I have no doubt about that. Glenn Sather's in his 70s now in New York. Would that be a job of interest to Ray? Dad coached in New York also in the early 80s. I could see that too. You'll hear from him again soon. And Dan Bilesma will be employed too. I just said that there are some people around the league have told me that maybe the consensus was Bilesma wasn't as good of a coach as people maybe initially thought. But he's still a pretty good coach. And if Bruce Boudreau, maybe the Ducks flame out and he gets fired, do you think Dan, a former Anaheim Duck, would love to have that job? Sure he would, and he'll be a head coach within a year or two. I have very little doubt.
They're both real well-spoken individuals who have experience, sitting in on panels and things like that too. So I'm sure any kind of broadcasting opportunities, or whether it's just for one night during the trade deadline or whatever that pop up, Dan Bylsma and Ray Shero would be on. I'm sure one of the first three people that you would call if you're setting up one of those shows.
Yeah, I'm convinced you're going to see Bylsma on TV this year. In fact, he's pretty good on TV. He just has a likable manner about him. Certainly more likable than some of the former coaches that we see on TV these days. I won't name any names.
Here's what I want. I want a national telecast on NBC, and that is also being covered by Rogers Sportsnet or something. And I want Dan Bylsma to get a between the benches job with Rogers Sportsnet and Pierre Maguire, so that you have a Penguins game versus whoever, and it's Pierre Maguire and Dan Bylsma up in between the benches.
Well, they wouldn't have a lot of nice things to say about the team in black and gold, I'm fairly certain.
No, I think especially with Edzo on the booth, it'd be like three unemployed construction workers sitting in a bar.
That's a good point. I got to be honest, I'm really looking forward to hearing Pierre during games this year, because I know a lot of people in Pittsburgh hate Pierre for whatever reason, but the consensus of Pierre Maguire around the league is that he's actually like a huge Penguins homer, and he really is. I mean, he and Ray Shero are really good friends. He and Mario are good friends. He always had really nice things to say about the Penguins. I'm very curious to see if that continues this season, because I have heard that he's a little bitter that he didn't get the Penguins GM job. I think he was much closer to getting that job than anybody realizes.
That's what I was
God, how much would we have to talk about then, by the way?
Yeah, because after it happened, there was a little, or even during the job hunt process and all the news that was coming out, it almost seemed like there was too much smoke surrounding Pierre Maguire, to the point where it seemed like, is this guy a red herring, or is this serious? But you think that it was?
No, I do. I mean, I think he absolutely was one of the finalists for the job. There's not a doubt in my mind. I've had enough people in the organization tell me that he was in the final three. He absolutely was, and trust me, there was a part of me that was really pulling for that, because my God, the stories would have been nonstop with Pierre as GM. I think that would have been great entertainment. But I didn't realize how open Jim Rutherford was, though. You talk about a guy who a reporter likes dealing with, man. You just give Jim a call and he'll give you something. Especially in the summer, he was just so great to deal with, and I like Ray Shero a lot. Trust me, he's a good man. I really like Ray. But he kind of ran the Penguins like it was the CIA. I mean, you didn't get a lot of information out of Ray very often. And Rutherford, he just says it like it is, which we love.
How much were you around in a capacity similar to what you are in the Craig Patrick era?
I really wasn't at all. I have dealt with Craig and the poster, but I didn't start covering the Penguins until after Craig was gone, actually a couple of years. So I can tell you that a lot of reporters didn't like Craig very much.
No, because
Craig would give you a lot of bad information, put it that way.
Oh, gotcha. Because that was when Ray Shero came in, it was kind of like, wow, what a breath of fresh air. He's so open, and as compared to Craig Patrick, and now we're hearing And it really did, especially toward the end. Ray Shero seemed like he was all, really tight ship, and especially compared to what Jim Rutherford was running when he was like, we missed that coach. We missed that coach. We missed that coach. I think we get this guy call. Hey, double claim. What's going on?
Yeah, I can't even imagine what Ray must have been thinking during that whole sequence. As for Craig Patrick, I think in his time he really was a genius. I mean, he had a great intuitive feel for offensive players, and he was very open-minded when it came to European players, which that might not sound like a big deal now, but in the late 80s and early 90s, that was a big deal. The Philadelphia Flyers took Mike Ricci with the 4th overall pick in 1990, and Jaromir Jagr went with the next pick to the Penguins, and I guarantee you they didn't take him because he was European. They just didn't like having European players on their team. And, Patrick was so open-minded about that, and certainly built some great teams. But to say he had lost his fastball by about 2005 is a drastic understatement. And when Ray Shero came along, he gave the organization, I think, a real sense of sophistication that had not been there in a long time. And he deserves a lot of credit for that. People in the organization to this day still speak awfully highly of Ray, but he kept things pretty tight to the vest. And Jim Rutherford definitely is a little more outspoken when it comes to what he thinks about his team.
Hey Nick, I'm out of questions.
Yeah, me
That's
too, man.
my professional way of wrapping this up.
That was